As we begin Yizkor, we say a verse from Psalms. Limnot yameinu ken hoda v'lavi levav chokhmah. Teach us to cherish our days. Teach us to count our days. Limnot, to count our days. Yom Kippur is a day of sacred accounting. We begin this holy accounting by reviewing our deeds and our words, commitments, and yet something deeper exists. As we all know, Yom Kippur is a reminder of the brevity of our lives, and paradoxically, our yearning for timelessness. Oliver Burkeman, some of you might have heard of Oliver Burkeman. He wrote a book all about time and time management, which he, of course, says is impossible. He eschews any time management model that you might find. He essentially argues that we have a poster of weeks. And he's created this poster of weeks that I bought and put up on my wall. It's a stark visual, imagining your life laid out in boxes along a grid, 52 rows, and your lifespan. And in an average life, there are roughly 4,576 boxes. And I know that sounds like a lot until you buy the poster. And you start crossing off the boxes. I've lived 2,898 weeks already. I only have, according to his math, God give me more, 1,678 more boxes. When you begin looking at the grid and you see how the majority is already filled in and the minority is awaiting you, it starts to feel a little bit tight. And it raises questions for each of us on how we want to fill each box. What do we place into those squares? Do we rush to fill them with achievement, endless activity, or can we sit with the awareness that not every box needs to be busy? On this sacred day, we're invited to slow down, to take stock, and to reflect. Are we giving ourselves to those things that really matter in our lives? This grid of time calls us to clarity, to ask if we are spending our days in a way that reflects our deepest selves, our loves, and our commitments. It's a paradox of Yom Kippur that in confronting the end of a year of missed opportunities, even of life itself, we learn how to live. Perhaps this day isn't just about regrets, but asking, how can I fill my days with what feels sacred to me? Perhaps on Yom Kippur, our question is not about having more time, but finding meaning in each passing day. Our modern world offers us an endless array of choices. The paths that we can take in life, or the number of ways we can spend each day. In New York City, it's exponential. What restaurant tonight? Which play tonight? Which friend? Which neighborhood? It can be so overwhelming. Choices are a blessing, but sometimes the volume of options makes it harder to be present in any single one of our choices. Berkman speaks about how this drive to choose correctly can rob us of the depth we so deeply crave. Does anybody relate to that? Stopping for a moment just to check in with all of you. Does this make sense? Like while we're trying to make the right choice, man, right here in front of us. It's one of those things that you wake up over and over again, right? And you say, while I'm planning what I'm going to eventually want, it's right in front of you. Can't tell you how many people spend most of their adult life, even after, especially after they've had children, providing for their children but not being with them. All of us, maybe, some of us. If you're not, we all want your card. I want to know. It's an invitation on Yom Kippur to stop for a moment and to try again to know what it is that is the most important thing to you, and to commit that this year, that will fill your boxes. This invitation to stop, to cease striving, to exist in the presence of what we always wanted and already have enough of, is to be in the presence of the divine. We're asked to do less today, to say less, to limit what we consume, and in that act of lessening, we paradoxically find more. And so here we stand or sit, each of us, fully present with our limitations. Yom Kippur asks us to say, Hineni, I am here in all of our vulnerability and imperfection. We will never read all of those books that we bought. I'm not kidding. I know there's a part of you that doesn't believe me because there's a part of me that doesn't believe me. One day I will finish all of those books. It's just a matter of time. I should just organize my time to finish all the books. What if each week we could return to that sense of Hineni this morning, without needing to be somewhere else, without chasing another accomplishment? What if we could together collectively meditate this morning, each of us in our own private Idaho, in our own mind, in our own heart, but come up with that thing that in the middle of December, when we're back running on the rat race or doing the thing that we forgot, that we'll say, okay. What if we could do that? I think there's brilliance in the rabbis placing Yizkor in the middle of Yom Kippur. We all know that we wish we had, many of us wish we had another conversation. One more phone call. I'm living it now as I have the privilege each week of having my aging parents coming here to the Y to teach them. And I think about it each time I run back to the next meeting that is scheduled right after I teach them. I say, Ingber, have lunch with them. So busy. There's a wisdom in knowing our limits. And Yom Kippur is the holiest of days to learn and lean into that awareness of what we're limited by. Again, Berkman, he suggests that we must embrace our limits not as constraints, but as gifts that guide us toward what matters. He challenges us to abandon the desire to do everything, to be everywhere and complete every goal. And on this day, we're invited to recognize human finitude, the truth that some things will remain unfinished, some dreams won't materialize, and some paths will forever remain unexplored. But rather than leaving us with regret, this realization can open a door to gratitude. What if we used each precious square to cultivate love, generosity, and courage, knowing that we won't accomplish it all? Yom Kippur teaches us to take a deep breath in the face of our limits and realize that those very limits shape who we are. When we let go of the illusion that we can control every outcome, we create the space to choose more meaningfully, and we can acknowledge that the commitments that really matter to us deserve our time. The relationships that sustain us deserve our cultivation, and the values that anchor us deserve our repetition. Yom Kippur isn't asking us to regret what we haven't done, but to accept the beauty of what we've chosen to do and to honor those choices with our full presence. That's challenging. Because regret is so pernicious. I'm going to ask for a show of hands, and if you don't put up your hand, don't regret it. But how many people feel intensely gripped by regret? Especially today, on a day when we're asked to look back and take stock of our lives, and part of that reckoning involves regret. There is holy regret. Berkman tells us to think about regret with a different lens. He says that regret isn't something to run from, but rather a compass that points to our deepest values. Regret reveals what we care about and what we wish we had prioritized. It's a tool, not a burden. It's a tool, not a burden. Love that. Regret shows us where our deepest values lie. What we regret shows what we value the most. So as we reflect, and we have time, as we reflect, we can look at our regrets not as failures, but as lessons. Regret is the cost of having options and making real choices. Yom Kippur asks us whether we can learn from these moments. What have our regrets taught us about what matters, and what might we change about spending our time as we go forward? So here we are, regretters, all of us, limited, all of us. Each of us with a certain number of weeks that have been checked off, some with more weeks to come and some with less weeks to come. And we each have choices. How will we spend those remaining weeks? The precious squares that are left on that poster. The reminder that we have 4,578 weeks is not supposed to frighten us. Although, just to be honest, when I bought the poster and put it up, it did frighten me. It did. It did. It still does a little bit. It still does. But those little boxes remind me, whenever I look at them, that it isn't about packing every square with activity, but filling them with what I hold sacred. Perhaps as we let go of control, we can hold on to what matters. I pray with each and every one of you, may each step into the coming year be a step that is full of courage to choose well, to live meaningfully, and to cherish the weeks we have, one square at a time. As we transition into Yizkor for the victims of October 7th, take a deep breath with me, everybody. Now's the time to have energy a little bit. The heart is open. I want to tell you a story about someone named Moshe. Moshe was a man of unwavering habit. In a small Jewish town in Eastern Europe, he lived with his wife, Rachel, with his two sons, Avram and Binyamin, and sometimes, if you ask him, even his faithful dog, Shlomo. Every morning, Moshe's day was as predictable as the rising sun. He would wake up precisely at 5 a.m., he would stretch his arms, he would yawn, he would dress and shuffle into the kitchen, where 2 eggs, a piece of toast, and a cup of strong black coffee awaited him. With his meal complete, he'd glance at the clock, noting it was just 6 a.m., and as was his routine, he would turn right out of his door, walk down the cobblestone path, arrive at his small shop exactly at 6:30 a.m. And once there, he would unlock the door, set up for the day, and begin work. And at 5:30 on the dot, Moshe would close the shop, lock the door, and turn left to go home, arriving promptly at 6 p.m. Every day, without fail, this was Moshe's rhythm, like the tick-tock of a well-wound clock. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months and years, with each one beginning and ending exactly the same way, until Moshe broke from his habit one fateful day. It was the end of a long work day, and Moshe decided to make a right turn out of his shop instead of his usual left. And for the first time, he took the path through the woods. He strolled deeper into the forest. The air was thick with earthy smells and whispers of rustling leaves. And then a sound drifted towards him, a melody, gentle and otherworldly. It was so beautiful that Moshe closed his eyes. He let the music fill his mind and heart. It guided his steps as he ventured further into the forest. And through the trees, he saw a flickering light, a tiny fire surrounded by teeny figures, all dancing in rhythm and song. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, with shimmering cloaks and twinkling eyes, moving to the melody in graceful, small steps. And just as Moshe felt himself getting lost in their music, he heard a sudden snap, and the figures disappeared, leaving only the still silent trees behind him. The beauty of that melody haunted Moshe. He couldn't let it vanish like a dream. As he tried to make his way back, he realized he was lost in the woods, and in desperation, he began to hum the melody and close his eyes, trusting it to guide him home. When he finally arrived, much later than usual, Rachel was waiting anxiously by the door. "Moshe, Moshe, where have you been?" she cried, scanning his face for answers. Moshe looked at her and opened his mouth and sang the melody. He couldn't speak, he could only sing. So began the strangest period in the town's memory. Moshe, the once orderly, reliable man of habit, now communicated solely through this strange, beautiful song. And Rachel was at her wit's end. She asked everyone for help, the butcher, the baker, the local merchant, even the town's wise old women. But no matter whom he spoke with, Moshe only answered them with the melody, sung from somewhere deep inside of him. Months passed, and Moshe's shop began to suffer. Customers came in asking for things they needed, only to be met with his haunting melody. His neighbors and friends grew concerned. His children puzzled over their silent father. And Rachel, poor Rachel, though deeply worried, she grew exhausted from asking question after question with no reply. Eventually, the townspeople took Moshe to the rabbi. Sitting across from the rabbi, Moshe closed his eyes. He filled his lungs and began singing the song again. The rabbi listened silently, letting the melody sink into his heart. And finally, he said, "Moshe, if you can't find your voice soon, we'll have to send you far away to get help. So please, Moshe, if you can, and if you want to stay, just tell us." Moshe's heart ached to respond, to tell his story. But when he opened his mouth, he could only sing. The rabbi sighed, and the townspeople began to raise money to send Moshe to a distant town to get him the help he needed. Soon the day of departure arrived, and the townspeople gathered at the train station, whispering goodbyes to Moshe as he still sung his melody. At the last moment, just as he was about to board the train, his little daughter tugged at his sleeve and pleading, "Please, Papa, don't leave." Moshe bent down, wanting desperately to reassure her, but again, nothing but music. And as the conductor shouted, "All aboard!" Moshe turned to take one last look at his family and neighbors, and just then someone from the crowd began to hum Moshe's melody. And then another voice joined. And then another. Until the entire crowd, his family, his friends, his community, was singing the song together, the melody rising and falling in harmony. Moshe stopped, awestruck, and suddenly he found his voice. "That was beautiful," he exclaimed. His wife gasped, clutching her heart, "Moshe, you can speak!" At last Moshe explained. The music was too precious, too beautiful to let it slip into oblivion. I couldn't write the melody down and describe it in words. I only knew that it had to be sung, shared, and learned by others so that it would live on. The melody was no longer his alone. It belonged to the entire community. In that little town, Moshe's melody became part of their traditions. It was sung at gatherings and celebrations, passed down from parent to child. And Moshe, the man of habit, had left his mark, ensuring that his song, one discovered in the hidden depths of the forest, would never be forgotten. In Yizkor, we come together like Moshe's village gathered around him to remember and honor those songs that we carry, each of us, in our hearts. Just as Moshe's song became the community's song, the stories and the memories of our loved ones become woven into the fabric of our lives and of our communities. When we remember them, it's as if we are singing their song. We sing by retelling the virtues, the quirks, the unique ways, the timbre of the voice, the touch of the hand, the idiosyncratic ways that each and every human being shows up and sings in this world. And just as Moshe feared that his precious melody would be lost if it wasn't sung, we also worry about losing those precious memories of our loved ones. As we enter this commemoration of those who were murdered on October 7th, I want to lift up the song of one kadosh, one holy martyr, one holy, incredibly beautiful human being. There were so many melodies, so many songs that were still in Aner Shapira. Aner was known not only as a courageous and skilled fighter, but also as a deeply compassionate and multi-talented individual. Everybody said that Aner touched them. Aner touched them. He was someone with a profound love of music, played guitar and piano, shared his music with his friends and family, and with students that he taught martial arts. He often brought people together through music, creating moments of peace and connection in his community. His playlist became the soundtrack for his loved ones who still remember him strumming his guitar or playing a melody on the piano with a calm and magnetic presence. Aner had a wide range of hobbies and interests. As I mentioned, he was an enthusiast of the martial arts. He both practiced and taught that. He didn't just teach technical skills, he instilled values like discipline and kindness and respect in his students. And Aner was also an avid runner and a hiker who loved the outdoors and often took on challenging trails, embracing both the physical and mental endurance that they demanded. He inspired others with his love for nature and in his belief that physical and spiritual resilience go hand in hand. Aner had a deep bond with Hirsch Goldberg Palin. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Who was his close friend and shared his values of loyalty and bravery. The two of them were part of a close-knit community that valued friendship and adventure, and above all things, selflessness. They frequently supported each other in every endeavor, from their physical pursuits to personal challenges, demonstrating to one another the deep seeds of their friendship. On the morning of October 7th, Aner attended the Supernova, the Nova Music Festival. It was a celebration that was filled with the very things that he loved most, music and joy. But the morning quickly turned to horror when barbarians launched an assault on the festival goers. Instead of fleeing, Aner sprang into action. He refused a possible route of escape. There were reports from witnesses that describe Aner's heroic efforts to protect others. And most famous of all is that he, along with Hirsch, were in a roadside shelter. And as the terrorists threw grenades into the shelter, Aner threw the grenade back 7 times until the final 8th one, in which it exploded in his hand. Each time he intercepted a grenade, he risked his own life to prevent others from being harmed. Aner lived out his values. He gave everything he had to protect those around him. By remembering Aner today and every day, we're not just honoring him as a hero, but we're keeping his song, his melody, precious as it is, alive and well in our community. Rabbi Delphine Orvilleur, a French rabbi, prolific writer, beautiful thinker, just incredible thinker, wrote a book that I've carried with me all year called Living with Our Dead. She speaks of the uninvited guests we carry with us, the souls of those who have passed and yet live on within us. She speaks with profound empathy about how the dead become woven into our story, how they live not merely in memory, but in the choices that we make, the actions that we take, and the love that we give. The dead, she writes, are not entirely absent. They are present in us, through us, and all around us. In her own words, she invites us to make room for those absences, to create a choreography with our dead. She wants us to imagine, like Jacob's limp given to him in a night of wrestling with the angel, that we each carried that limp with us for the rest of our lives. But our walk is changed in the choreography with those who have passed. This moment of Yizkor brings to mind the experience of a mikveh, a ritual bath where we immerse ourselves in memory and let it wash over us as we hold sacred pain. Of all of those in the last year whose visage comes to mind when we think of how it is to walk with that pain, I think of Rachel Goldberg Pollen. Think of her immense grace and dignity in the face of unimaginable pain. I think of the ways in which she showed up and called all of us to attenuate ourselves and to attune ourselves to the reality that for those living in Israel, October 7th is still today. It is still October 7th. And maybe I think that she wouldn't want us to make her into some symbol, but I couldn't help thinking, and others have said this, that when our tradition imagines a mother crying for her children who refuses to be comforted, it is also a Rachel Rachel, the matriarch. The book of Jeremiah imagines that Rachel is mivaka al baneha, that Rachel, who is buried by the side of the road, cries for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are lost. Ki enenu. Rachel's refusal to be comforted isn't an inability to move on, but a resistance to forgetting that precious song, to erase the unbearable truth that her child is gone, that his father is gone, that his mother is gone, that her brothers are gone. All of those kiddushim, those holy ones, who were left orphaned at this moment. Rachel mivaka al banea. Rachel is crying for her children. And like that Rachel, each and every one of us stands as a witness, as a Yizkor, promising to never let those precious songs, Moshe's melodies, be forgotten.